Hi, welcome to Karebo. So in this episode of our LeetCode series, we'll be solving a question called Robot Return to Origin. So in this LeetCode question, we are given a robot and the robot obviously starts from origin. So what is origin? We have a Cartesian plane like this, and in this graph, our robot is at the origin, that is the 0, 0 position. And we are given a string which gives the robot instructions to move around the graph. And finally, after executing all those instructions, we have to find out whether the robot has returned back to the origin or it is somewhere else. So this function is going to return a boolean value, either true or false. So the function would return true if the robot has returned back to the origin, and false if the robot hasn't returned back. And of course that's what the function will return. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's get to a sample example and let's find out the algorithm that we want to use in order to solve this question. And at the later part of the episode, we'll also go to the LeetCode and code the algorithm that we developed. So without further ado, let's get started. First of all, what are the possible moves that the robot can do? It can go up, down, left or right. So these are the possible moves that the robot can do. So let's take an example. So here the input is U and D. So what does this U and D mean? These are just letters to us, right? But U represents up and D represents down. So initially the robot is at the center, right? So it has to go up and then it has to come down. Obviously, since we know that both of these things are opposite, if it has went up one step and came down one step, it would return back to the origin and hence the output is true. But in case the example was something like this, LL, in that case we'd be at 0, 0, we'll move left and then again left. We are not returning back to the origin, right? And hence our function should return false. So using these two examples, we'll develop an algorithm such that it works for all the four cases, that is up, down, left and right. Okay. So let us have two values, x and y, representing the point at which the robot is present. Initially, since the robot is at origin, x value and the y value both are 0. So here we have set the values of the variables x and y as 0. So let us get to the first instruction that is given to the robot, which is up. So the robot travels from 0, 0 to some point which is up of the point 0, 0. So if it moves up, what coordinate of the point would change? We of course know that the x coordinate does not change, just the y coordinate is incremented by 1, because by the graph we know that this is 0, 0 and this is 0, 1, right? So y coordinate is incremented by 1 and hence after the execution of the instruction U, the robot would have moved one step up, which would result in the point of 0, 1. Okay, so what is the next step? We have to move to the next character, which is D, which means the robot has to come down. So if it comes down, obviously the y value would get decreased to 0 and hence the robot comes back to the origin. Okay, it was pretty easy. So what did we do? If we are executing an instruction called U, our y value must get incremented by 1. And if we are executing the value, that is the instruction D, then it means our y value gets decremented by 1. That's pretty easy to remember. So let's have that. Moving on to the next example. What should we do for left and right instructions? So we know that this point is 0, 0. And if the robot were to move to the left, it would move here, right? So if this were 0, 0, what would this point be? Of course, the y coordinate would remain same in this case, but the x coordinate would decrement if it were a left. And hence, our point would be minus 1, 0. So if it were a left, we would have to decrement the value of x. And of course, if it were a right, we would have to increment the value of x. And similarly, since we have again a left instruction, the x value would get decremented by 1, resulting in minus 2, 0. Since we have executed all the instructions, but our robot is not back to the origin, that is, our x and y both must be 0, right? Here, that ain't the case, and hence we are going to return the value as false. So, overall, to sum up, our algorithm is going to work on these bases. We are going to traverse the instructions that is given to us, that is, the string that is given to us, L, L, U, D, something like that. So, we are going to traverse this string, and if it were an up, we would increment the value of y. First point. Second, then if it were a down or D, we would decrement the value of y. So, y would become minus 1, right? So, if it were left, we would decrement the value of x, and if it were a right, we would increment the value of x. So, these are the 4 possible cases, and these are the 4 possible conditions that we are going to give in this algorithm. So, it is going to be a very simple if-else-if structure. So, if our character is u, then increment the value of y, and if it were d, decrement the value of y, and if it were left, decrement the value of x, and if it were right, increment the value of x. So, these 4 conditions inside a for loop which is traversing the given string would complete our code. And finally, what you would have to check? You would have to check whether the given x and y values are 0 again. If they are 0 again, then it means our robot has returned back to the origin. And if it's not 0, then our robot has not returned back to the origin, and hence we would have to return false. So this is our algorithm. Now let's get to LeetCode and code this logic that we developed. Let's get started with the solution coding of this problem. So we are given a function called judge circle, and this obviously contains the instructions that is given to us in the form of a string. So the name of the string given to us is moves, and this should obviously return a boolean value, true or false. True if the robot has returned back to the origin, and false if it has not returned back. So let's first start by traversing the given instructions. Before doing that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use a for each loop in order to traverse this string. So how do we use that? We can also use a normal for loop and traverse it based on indexes, but the other method is obviously to use a for each loop. So I'm gonna traverse this string by character. So let me state it as character x colon moves, and I'm giving it as 2 character array. So what we are doing here is we are converting the given string into a character array. Since a for each loop only is used for traversing sequences like arrays, we must first convert the string into a character array and then use a for each loop to traverse this string character by character. So at each iteration, we would have the value of x being updated to the respective character. So let's get started by coding the 4 conditions that we saw, starting with our first character. So if x is equal to u, if it were equal to u, what should we do? If it were up, we saw that the y value must be incremented. Since we are going to use x and y for the values, let me change this to something like I. Okay, so y value should be incremented. So can I just increment the value of y? Have I declared it? No. So before our for loop, we must declare 2 variables called x and y. So x is equal to 0, y is equal to 0. So these are the 2 points that represent our position of the robot. So y value is incremented if it were an up instruction. Else if I equal to down. In this case, obviously, the y value would be decremented. Again, else if I is equal to, now let's have left. In this case, obviously, x would be decremented. And the last case, of course, is the value right. in that case we would have to increment the value of x. So these if conditions are going to give us our desired position of the robot after the execution of the for loop. So after the execution of the for loop, we have two values, x and y. If both the value of x and y both are 0, so x is equal to 0 and y is equal to 0. If both the values were 0, then it means the robot has returned back to its origin. In that case, we would return true. Else, if that's ain't the case, then we would have to return false. So this is gonna be our code for this LeetCode problem. Now let's submit this code and verify our output. So it has definitely passed the sample test cases that are given. Now let's check for every other test case that is given to the LeetCode problem. Loading. Yeah, it's done. Yeah, so you have successfully passed the given question. So this is how you solve the LeetCode question, robot return to origin. So this was a very simple string traversal plus if ladder question. That was a pretty easy question to solve. So if you are interested in these kind of questions, we have a playlist reserved for it. Check that out. And if you love this video, please drop a like and subscribe to Code.io. See you in the next episode of the Code.io LeetCode series. Bye bye.